Eighth grade lesson 15.2 is two-way relative frequency tables. It's really kind of just an extension of 15.1, building on it. This is heavy vocabulary. There's quite a bit of vocabulary, and it's kind of just building on what you learned on the two-way frequency tables. So we're just going to get a little deeper into it, but it's our last lesson. It's kind of a longer one. I hope not to go too long. I'll try and keep it short, but just be ready. There's a lot of information coming at you. But again, just take everything bite by bite and pay attention to the detail, and you'll work around some of that vocabulary that's thrown at you too. No worries, you'll have this. So in the previous lesson, we talked about two-way frequency tables, and then we talked about relative frequency, meaning just like the percents when you compare those ratios. And so this is extending that. So here's the example we start with, and then we can build on this particular example as we go in each of the next examples. The frequency table below shows the results of a survey that Maria took at her school. She asked 50 randomly selected, total, right, students whether they prefer dogs, cats, or other pets. Convert this table to a relative frequency table that uses decimals as well as one that uses percents. Okay, now she only has one row of information. It's not a two-way one necessarily because she doesn't have another bit of information in it, but that gets added soon. So of the total 50 that she asked, 22 liked dogs, 15 liked cats, and 13 preferred something else, but all totaled, that was 50. So to get the relative frequency, we're going to do the ratio of dog here to total. And for cat, we would do cat, oops, I need another color, cat to total 50. And 15 divided by 50 is 0.3. I'm just going to put 0.3 there. Other, there was 13 other preferred pets out of the 50 people that were asked, and 13 divided by 15 is 0.26. Now if I were to add 0.44 plus 0.3 plus 0.26, I would get 1.00, or just 1. And that's 50 out of 50 is 1. Okay. They're going to do the same thing, but all they're doing here, between here and here, is changing these decimals to a percent. So that's just moving the decimal twice over, 44%. This 0.3 becomes 30%. Remember, you move the decimal twice. If there's a spot there, put a 0. 0.26 becomes 26%, and 1.00 becomes 100%. So that's where we're at to start with. She asked the 50 students which type of pet they preferred. She made it into a decimal, that data into a decimal with a ratio of dog to total, cat to total, other to total. She turned that into a percent by just moving the decimal twice over or multiplying by 100. That's this first part for the relative frequency table. Okay, going from a relative frequency table into a two-way frequency table that has two categories of information. We have this same data of the dogs and cats, but she split it into not just which students preferred dogs and cats, but which of those students that preferred dogs and cats, how many were girls, how many were boys. So she's got two pieces of data, girls, boys, what were their preferences for dogs, cats, and others. So now we're comparing two categories of information. So of the total girls, I would just add all of these up across here to find out how many of those students were. And remember, it's still 50 students, right? We still had 50 that were asked. Of those 50, let's go across the girls row. That's 10 plus 9 is 19, 20, 21, 22 were girls. And add these up. This is going to be 16 plus 12, 28 were boys. And of course, these two together should equal 50. If they don't, then I may have miscalculated somewhere else, but those do equal 50. How many of the students liked dogs? 22. This is going to look much like the row up here. How many of all the students liked cats? 15. We had that up here. How many of them liked something else? 13. And so now we have a two-way frequency table in terms of now we're not just talking about what all 50 students liked in preference to pets. But we've also got the preference to pets compared with how many of those were girls, how many of those were boys. 2 pieces of data put together into a two-way frequency table. This was a frequency table. Again, now we're going to go into a two-way relative frequency table, and that's where we're going to start seeing those percentages come back at us, those ratios and percentages. And this is where that heavy brunt of vocabulary came in that seemed really confusing, or seems really confusing at first. But as I explain it, I'm hoping to make it more clear. You have a joint relative frequency. That's found by dividing a frequency that is not in a total row and divide it by the grand total here. And then a marginal relative frequency is found by dividing a row total or column, either here or here, by the grand total. So I'm just going to put some highlights, I think, to help us out. If any of these are divided by the grand total, then you've got your joint relative frequency. If any of these are divided by the total, then you have a marginal relative frequency. And then, of course, the two-way relative frequency table is displaying the two-way information, but in the terms of the percentage, decimals, or percents. All right? So they want us to create a two-way relative frequency table for Maria's data. We're going to divide each number in the two-way frequency table from the previous Explore activities, that's why I kept them handy, by the grand total. So everything's being divided by our grand total of 50. So of the boys, so they did a lot of them for us. Of the girls who liked dogs, 10 of them, divided by 50, 0.2 was the joint relative frequency. 9 girls preferred cats, divided by the grand total of 50, so 0.18 or 18% of girls like cats in the class. 3 were the girls who liked other pets, divided by the grand total of 50. This is joint relative frequency, 0.06, which would be 6%. Out of the boys who preferred dogs, 12 out of 50, 0.24 or 24%. Out of the boys who preferred cats, that was this one right here, is 6 out of the 50. Divide that, and 6 divided by 50 is 0.12 or 12%. Out of the boys who preferred something else, that was 10 of them, divided by the grand total of 50 for that joint relative frequency, and you get 0.2 or 20%. Now we'll do the marginal relative frequency. So I'm going to add, they went ahead and added all of these and got 22. So 22 girls out of 50 so that's 44%, or 0.44 or 44% of the class are girls. This should be added together, 12 plus 6 plus 10 adds to 28, which we had over here already. 28 out of 50 of the class are boys, and 28 divided by 50 is 0.56, or 56% of the class are boys. Of the total, and so this was one of our marginal relative frequencies, and here's our other marginal relative frequencies. So now those vocabulary words are hopefully just sinking in. But you're just seeing they're all ratios of one compared to the other, and that's the most important part. Of all of the students who prefer dogs, it was 22 out of 50, the grand total, and you divide that, you get 0.44, so 44% of the whole class total is preferred dogs. Out of cats, that was 15 out of 50. 15 divided by 50 is 0.3 or 0.3%. 0.3 as a decimal, or 30%. And then other, that was this 13 out of 50 for that marginal relative frequency. 13 divided by 50 is 0.26 or 26%. Check by adding the joint relative frequencies in a row or column to see if the sum equals that row's or column's marginal frequency. So I just want to check and make sure things add up the way they're supposed to. And they throw all those words at us and it feels much more confusing than it actually is. Hopefully I did an okay job of walking you through that. So we have for the boys row, so we're just going straight across 0.24, 0.12, and then 0.2, and hopefully that adds together to our 0.56. If we've done it right, it will. So we have 0.24 plus 0.12 plus 0.2. It should equal 0.56. We will calculate it just to make sure we haven't made a calculation error. That is a 6, 2, 4, 5, and hooray, 0.56. So we're good there. Checky, checky. Then they said, check your cat column. Okay, so 0.18 and 0.12 together should give me 0.3. So 0.18 and 0.12. That's 10 and that's 3.3, yay, for us. And the other column, this one here, 0.06 plus 0.2 should be 0.26. And 0.06 plus 0.2 is going to be 0.26, yay for us. It all checks out. But those are our relative frequencies, the ratios compared to each other for all of the data. So now that it's all broken down, if they ask you, oh, of what percent of girls preferred cats? 18%, like you have it all laid out for you. And really, once you have it all laid out like that, whatever they ask you in the word problem, you just have to glance back at your two-way relative frequency table and you're good. So this was creating a relative frequency table. Remember, it was only one piece of data, the pets you preferred. And we went ahead and did the relative part being the ratios, decimals, percents to the total. Then we did a two-way frequency table in that it wasn't just animals preferred, but now we broke it down by boys and girls and which they prefer. So that's the two-way part of it. This was the frequency table. Then we extended that to the relative frequency table in terms of getting both of those pieces of information, those categories of information, and doing the ratios to the grand total. They gave us all this vocabulary, joint relative frequency. That just meant these little pieces in here of information divided by the grand total, and the marginal relative frequency. This piece is on the outside divided by the grand total. And now you have your two-way, two pieces of data. Relative, it's in decimal, which is easy to make a percent. Frequency table, ta-da. And then you can use that to answer questions. So hopefully I explained that fine. That's our last lesson together, you guys. You did great this year. Thank you so much for going on this adventure with me. And I wish you all the best of luck in 9th grade algebra. You are going to do an amazing job. Make me proud.